Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to today's video, and today we are going to be fixing this giant coconut. So it's a stand-up paddleboard, NSP, but it is laminated using coconut. They actually went to the trouble of making a patent to laminate coconut husk, which is pretty strange to me. My first question was, if I was to go overseas to Hawaii, say the Philippines, and try to fly a coconut back into this country, there is no way on God's green earth they would allow me to bring a coconut into New Zealand. So how are NSP bringing this amount, 10, 12 foot worth of coconuts into New Zealand? I don't get it. Now, the only reason I can think they would use coconut to laminate these boards is because, of course, they're using EPS foam, which is just absolute garbage. We can see just how soft this crap is. And there's no water in this board. It was damaged on land. So the foam is just doo-doos, really low density. And when you make a board this thick, it's like 2 inches at the tail, you just have a giant soft sponge. No amount of laminating is going to make that strong. So they're experimenting with coconuts, which are incredibly strong. If you have ever tried to open a coconut before, you know how strong they are. So it only figures if you flattened it out and rolled it onto a blank, it should be strong as well. So that's what I'm thinking NSP are thinking. So damage is pretty straightforward. Board was dropped on its tail trying to store it in the shed. I've already sanded it. I've cut away any delaminated glass, and if we go underneath it to the deck side, we have some splitting along here as well, which we'll see a bit closer later, but I've sanded all the paint away and we need to fill it. Stand-up paddleboards. Our deck side damage here, so there was a split along here, which is still there. So I've sanded all that paint away, and we need to fill that as well as the other side as well. Now, while every other ding fixing YouTuber at this stage of the process, they would mix up a bunch of resin and Q-cell, they'd probably make a resin dam and fill this. We're smarter than that, so we're going to use a better suited product, which is, once again, we've used it once before in these videos, but we're going to use this fairing paste. So it's an epoxy product, it's a marine product, mostly used on boats, and it is just a 1-to-1 mix. So you kind of take semi-even clumps of each part. It's not an exact measurement, but you want to get it as close as you can. This stuff has a few benefits. One, it is really strong, like insanely strong. Two, it is much more like a bulk / glue, so it doesn't slump and lose its shape. You don't need a tape dam to hold it into place. It's easy to mix, and for this board in particular, our big benefit is going to be the color. This is going to be a much closer color to not just the coconut, but kind of the yellow that's underneath the coconut. So it's going to save us some painting in the future. So some people do freak out a bit when they're presented with a board with some weird construction, be it something as simple as carbon fiber or like firewire and all their LFT and weird construction, FST and all that stuff. The trick with epoxy boards is don't treat it any different to any other epoxy board. Just because the manufacturer has convinced the customers that their construction is state of the art and going to be 10 times better than every other epoxy board on the market, the reality is they're all repaired the same way. If you want to get really techie and like replace the carbon fibre and all that kind of stuff, you can, but it's not necessary. It's just going to be a case of epoxy products like fillers and epoxy laminations, and that's it. And don't put paint under the lamination. We'll do the painting at the very end, which most manufacturers do anyway, because paint under epoxy products is a nightmare waiting to happen. So we have our shape roughly there. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to do a bit of sanding work. This stuff is really hard and really difficult to sand, so we don't want to leave too much in excess because it is just so difficult to sand. Same underneath, filled that crack. So we're going to leave that 24 hours to cure, and then we'll come back tomorrow, sand it and laminate it. Hopefully we get it all done in our first sand and we're ready for lamination. Okay, so a critical part of fixing surfboards seems to be to have yourself a greenhouse. So we've made a slight detour back home, and luckily for me, I just happen to have fresh coconut growing in the greenhouse. Look at that. So New Zealand coconuts, they do grow a little differently in New Zealand than they do in Thailand, Hawaii. They're a favourite dog toy in New Zealand. Get that, Moz. Get that. So now we have our freshly picked coconut. We can go ahead, go back to work and laminate this sucker into a stand-up paddleboard. Okay, now that we have our fresh coconut and our area is sanded smooth to shape and we are ready for lamination, it's time to prep our freshly picked coconut. Hey, get off that. Get off that. Oh no, I need that. I am hoping I don't get sued because there is a patent pending on this technology, but let's give it a go and hope NSP don't take me to court. So I think the process here is going to be pretty easy. I should let you know I've never done this before, and if it weren't for this YouTube channel, I wouldn't do this, but I thought we may as well give it a go. So all I'm going to do is peel all of this cruddy string off of our coconut. And I don't think we're going to need heaps of it, but I'm going to pull off a bunch more than we need. Alright, I'm kind of hoping that's going to be enough. It's only a little area, so shouldn't need too much. So we are done with our coconut. Get it, Marley. See what he can do with that. We'll check back in on him. Obviously we can't laminate straight over this because it's too proud. It's going to give us a bunch of air bubbles and stuff in our cloth. So my theory is I'm going to separate it all as best I can. I'm going to lay it on these old templates. I'm going to sandwich it like that. Cheap dog toys. Hey Miles, get it. Now that we've got it in our sandwich, I'm just going to press them basically and clamp the shit out of them. It's all clamped up. I'm going to leave that overnight just to flatten it as much as possible before laminating. And then what we're going to do today, because it's epoxy and the curing time's so long, I'm going to do the opposite of what I normally do. So because the sharp edge here is already shaped, I don't want to wrap cloth over it because I'm going to get air bubbles on that sharp 90 degree. So we're going to laminate this section to here tonight, and then tomorrow we can laminate this section here with our coconut fibers in it. Well, we're back the next day and I'm sick. So hopefully we won't be in for too long today because I feel like I've been hit by a train, if I'm honest. But I'm actually pretty excited to try and lay this coconut fiber. So I thought I'd at least come in today and do the epoxy work that needs doing. Kind of the problem with epoxy is because of the drying time, if you miss a day of coating or laminating or whatever it is, you can't really make that day back. Poly's a bit different. If I miss a day of pouring poly or laminating in poly, you can kind of make it back up the next day. Cut them out. It doesn't have to be that neat with epoxy because I have to sand that lamination anyway before I lay a resin coat over it, so it doesn't have to be that tidy. Not gonna lie, I'm quite excited to see how this turned out. Hopefully flat enough to laminate easily. Well, it's definitely flatter than it was yesterday. This might take a little bit of finesse. I've definitely got enough. Alright, I think I've got an idea on how to do this. Let's give it a go. gonna be honest, the odds of this working are pretty low. But if it doesn't work, the beauty of fiberglass is we can just sand it all off. What we could do if the board was at all worth the effort that we're currently putting into here, I could take a photo of the surface of the board here and just print that photo out onto rice paper and then laminate the rice paper into this same area. But given the opportunity here to try and laminate a real fresh coconut, I figured we may as well give it a go. So you never know. Best case scenario, I'll sand it and I'll be able to use what I've done, but I'll probably have to laminate over it again. That's kind of what I'm expecting to happen, but if I have to sand it all off completely, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm not gonna lie to you, I've actually already done this whole yarn. I've taken the thing off, I've done the grand reveal, and none of it was recording. So now I've just put it all back together just to show, keep the suspense alive, you know. It's part of the problem with this whole amateur video making thing. But here is the grand reveal. So it is not too shabby. It's pretty flat, which was my bigger concern, or my biggest concern. There don't seem to be any air bubbles in it. Excuse me while I fix the lighting. There is a little air bubble just there, but I mean, that's a pretty solid lamination. The color's a little off, as you can see, but I actually do have a product that will help us correct that. So I think that's quite fixable, but I'll give it a sand. We'll see how it comes up, and then we've got all these epoxies to pour before I go home anyway. So we'll put some epoxy resin on it and yeah, see how it looks again tomorrow. So I actually charge a $50 oversize fee for anything over 10 foot. So kayaks, big sups, surf skis, anything like that. This board comes in at 10 foot and 2 inches. So by 2 inches, that 2 inches is going to cost our customer another $50 because it's a pain in the ass to carry these things around. They take up so much room that they don't even fit on the racks properly. This is another one that's just come in as well. I'm not sure how long that one is. 10 foot 6, so that extra 6 inches just up there. That's gonna cost them another $50 just for the honor of being on these racks. So that might be something you wanna consider doing in your business, because these things are heavy, they're annoying, and they come with a large risk of knocking other customers' boards onto the ground and doing further damage, which then of course I would have to pay for. So there needs to be some kind of policy when it comes to oversized surf craft. Policy or punishment for riding them, maybe. I mean, it's not bad. It's bad for us because one of the big problems with ding repairs is you're always focusing so hard on the small area that you're fixing, but you consider the size of this board and most people aren't going to be staring right there. In fact, most people aren't going to be looking at this board at all, if we're honest. So I think it's going to be okay. It's gonna be okay. So we've flipped this thing over, given it a sand just to get rid of any masking tape edges from that first coat we put on yesterday. And now this should be our last coat of resin. Tomorrow we should be able to sand and paint and call it a day on the coconut board. We have all of our resin on the board, so we're going to sand it today up to 320, 400 wet, and then we're going to paint it. We got a blue we have to put on, and then there's a black pinstripe as well, I believe. Yeah, under here. So we'll probably get the paint on tomorrow, but get it sanded up, ready to go today. Alright, so pinstripes on, I did forget, so we're going to have a look now. As we know, New Zealand coconuts are quite a bit browner than coconuts that come from Thailand, so we're going to see if we can correct that. And Molotov make these paints which they call transparent, so both of these cans contain the same colour, which is called milk coffee, but this is just a standard milk coffee, and this one is a milk coffee transparent. They do a few different transparents. They're particularly helpful for doing old browned vintage boards. So this is just the standard milk coffee, just an ordinary acrylic paint. So as you would expect, it covers everything up and it is that milk coffee kind of colour. This next one is our milk coffee transparent. So same colour, but you can see it just kind of stains the surface. It doesn't paint the surface. So it's good for if you're painting over old vintage boards, you still get the texture of the foam and the fiberglass through the paint, and it more stains it as opposed to leaving a big solid kind of flat looking surface on whatever you're painting. So my plan is to paint our darker New Zealand coconut with the transparent milk coffee and see if we can get a bit more of a consistent look to it. If it doesn't work, I'll just sand it off and we'll finish it how it is. Seemed to do the trick pretty well, so a little bit of clear coat and we're done. We'll finish sand it and polish it all tomorrow. perks of the job. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me on this adventure, fixing coconut laid up boards. I'm sure it won't come in handy for anybody. This isn't a job I would usually do, or a repair that I would usually do on a board. Normally we would just paint the area to match, but it seemed like an opportunity to maybe experiment a little bit, so why not give it a go? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you're all well, and we will see you in the next one. Choo-hoo!